J'ai le plaisir d'accueillir Julia Cagé et Simon Briol est là aussi. Euh, Andrea Prat, je sais pas, je le vois pas. Euh, Bienvenue et merci beaucoup de nous proposer ce séminaire idée sur ce projet dont vous allez nous parler évidemment. Et donc, on est d'accord que on est sur un projet d'expérimentation. Vous n'allez pas nous présenter encore des résultats, mais vous allez nous présenter le projet, ce qui vous pousse à réaliser ce projet, en quoi il consiste, et puis le design expérimental, et ce qui est aussi une occasion pour les gens qui sont là de réagir et peut-être, j'espère, de vous donner des idées et des suggestions utiles. Comme il y a peut-être des étudiants anglophones qui sont là ou qui vont arriver, Julia voulait bien faire la présentation en anglais. So we're gonna keep on in English from now. So thank you again very much, Julia, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks, Mark, for giving us this opportunity. We are glad to present this project. I have to say that even the title we changes this morning. So for now, it's called Access to Information, News Consumption and Democratic Participation, a nationwide experiment in French high schools. So this is joint work with Simon Briol, who you know, and Andrea Prat, who is professor of economics at Columbia University. This is the very, very first set of slides, because as you will see, the experiment is still on the field, but we thought at the time we are like trying to finalizing our pre-analysis plan, that it was a very, very good time for us to get feedback. So really do not hesitate to jump at any point. Uh, our departure point come from the fact that if you look at data, and in particular survey data for recent years, one of the things that we see is that across countries in the world, people are turning away from the news. There is a declining willingness to pay for news, which is not entirely new. But we also see a decline in online news engagement, how long people spend online, the fact of sharing news articles, making comment, and just like reading the news. And we also see in the data that these trends are worst among younger people, and so there is a lot of information inequality. I'm just showing you one figure that comes from the last digital news report that is done every year by the Reuters Institute. So they put the average for a couple of countries like UK, US, Germany. They average over like 17 different countries, and they look at the proportion of the people who got news online between 2015 and 2024. And what you see is that across like all individuals, there is a decline. So people tends to have less news online than in the past, and that this decline is particularly strong among young people. For those people that are between 18 and 24-year old, in 2015, 89% of them were getting news online, and now this is below 76%. So for a very long time, we thought that, okay, young people, you know, they are not reading print media, perhaps they listen less to the radio and watch a little bit less TV, but this is not an issue because they are getting their news online. And what we see now in the data is that even online, they are not getting news. Okay, so one of these departure points is really to understand this decline in news consumption together with another fact that we see in the data and that is documented in the literature is that there is more and more misinformation. There are more and more fake news online. So I don't want to put too much weight on this thread because we have some evidence of the fact that okay, fake news are not making the elections as of today. At least there were like an article by Alcott and Gensko that look at the effect of fake news on the 2016 Donald Trump election in the US. Now I know that there are all these debate about what is happening in Romania, but I'm not saying that everything it's about misinformation. But people they consume less news. We know that there is more misinformation around. And we also know that among those people who no longer consume information or who don't consume information, compared at least to those who consume information, there is less news knowledge and there is less political knowledge. again, this is not something that is entirely true. In fact, if you look at the literature, the first evidence that we have on that was at the time TV was introduced and people were spending less time, for example, reading newspapers, and we see the growing a knowledge gap. But now that people not only they watch TV, but perhaps they go on the internet, and on the internet they do something else than consuming news, we might be afraid of the fact that people are less informed than in the past. The other thing I really want to insist on, because this was one of the departure point of this research project we have with Simon and Andrea, was the fact that people are not equal with respect to information, and that there are a lot of information inequality. And this has been documented, in particular in the literature. We know that younger people are more vulnerable to fake news. And this is even more true in a world that Marcus Pryor first called a world of media choices. You might find it a little bit surprising, but the more media choices, in fact, the higher the possibility for you to consume news, the higher the knowledge gap. Because yes, people, you can select yourself into news, and you can spend your entire day reading high quality news, but you can also decide to do exactly the opposite and select yourself out of news and not consume any news. And this is what we see in particular among the young. This,
Julia,
yeah, yeah.
just to understand, when you say that, how is that measured? It's just like they ask people questions about recent event in the world or stuff like that?
Exactly. So what Marcus Pryor did is that they did survey people about national politics, international politics. So national politics, it would be like very simple question like what is the name of your president, what is the name of your MP, and you can ask people about like also like simple like knowledge questions like where is France, in which continent, these kind of things. And one of the things that they measure is that they look at the same questions like before and after. For example, before and after the introduction of digital TV. And they see that people that shift to digital TV and consume less news on TV, they are less informed following that. Yeah. So, like this paper I refer to, they are from 2005, 2007. So, of course, we are not the first one to be like afraid about this information inequality. And in fact, you have had some policies implemented in order to increase free access to high quality news, as if it were like the tool to reduce information inequality. If you look at France and Canada following COVID, for example, policies were introduced with tax credit for a subscription to a newspaper, which is a way, in a sense, to give, like, to reduce the price of access to high quality news for citizens. In France, I don't know whether you remember that. It was following the État généraux de l'information par Nicolas Sarkozy. But in 2009-2012, there were a Mon Journal offert program where they were offering for 1 year a free subscription to all the kids that were turning 18. The thing is that none of these policies has ever been evaluated. And so we have no idea of whether it worked or not, and whether first of all, people, they take advantage of it, and whether you just have, kind of an opportunity effect. You are going to subscribe and you have it for free, or whether like you convince people to actually read news. So basically, the question is to know whether giving free access to high quality news guarantees that citizens who do not consume news will do so when provided with information for free. And again, this is not obvious first in a world where news compete with a lot of things, and in particular with entertainment. Second, in a world where we do have evidence that people might decide to avoid news for free because they think that they are overwhelmed with news, that news is too sad or too negative. And also in a world where there is already a lot of freely accessible content. So what we want to do in this paper is basically we want to investigate and quantify the extent to which low news consumption is something that is due to a price barrier. So okay, now the majority of the high quality newspapers, even online, they are behind the paywall, at least for part of their content, and this is expensive. Average monthly subscription to a newspaper in France would be around like 12 euros, which is not nothing, in particular for young people. Whether this is due to a lack of information. So basically, people, I'm going to caricature a little bit, but young people, they don't make the difference between like watching a video on TikTok and seeing Bardella or Mélenchon and reading an article about like French politics. They think they get some information in both cases. or whether this is due to a lack of interest in use. And when I say at least in its current format, I mean like with written text rather than videos, this kind of stuff. To do so, what we decided to do is to study the effect of free access to digital media on a number of different learning and political outcomes that I'm going to describe later on, but we're going to look at news consumption, political knowledge, time use patterns, participation in election, etc. And to do that, we set up a unique collaboration with French online news media. This is a print media, but this will be an online subscription. So the content will include not only text, but also videos, audio, etc. And we did a randomized experiment among secondary school students in France. Okay, so basically the kids in our sample are between 16 and 18 years old. Okay. So I'm going obviously to provide you more detail, but just to introduce the intervention, this will be a large-scale randomized experiment. We have 245 secondary schools included. We have 383 classes, and overall we have more than 10,000 students. This will be students from 10, 11, and 12 grades, so seconde, première, and terminale. We did the randomization at the school level, and we stratified by the school socioeconomic status, the school type, the grade level, and something that you will see may matter, which is the intensity of the media education practice of the participating teachers within the school. So before the intervention, I'm going to come back to that, but obviously we might have some selection in the way schools decided or not to participate, and so we want to be sure that at least those schools in the control and treated group are at the same level of media education before entering into the experiment.
So in practice, Julia, you have a bit more than one teacher per school who
Yes.
volunteer to contribute, right? That's the idea. And when you have more than one, it's a school randomization, but in a sense, it's almost a teacher level randomization.
Yeah, but we always do so even if you have two class in the school, they will be in the same
Yeah.
treated group.
Sure.
We did that for spillover effects. At some point, we were
Sure,
thinking about but basically you're right.
Yeah.
And so we have three treatments, just one control group, of course. The first treatment will be the free access to the online news media. The second treatment, and I'm going to give you more detail, will be like media education. And then we have a combined treatment when you both have the free access and the media education program. And we did that, we are doing that during the academic year 2024-2025. So I won't have a lot of preliminary results because, of course, we are still on the field. The only thing that I want first to highlight, because it's important, I guess, to motivate what we do with respect to the existing literature, is that our partnership with the online news media allow us to follow the actual behavior of the students online. So this won't be only about survey data, like asking people, do you consume news and this kind of stuff. We can see whether they activate their subscription. When they go online, we see them. We see the page they visit. We see how long they spent online, etc., etc. Which is something that is completely unique to the extent of my knowledge in the media economics literature. So I'm going to give you like some descriptive results today on the uptake of the news subscription. As of today, we have like 2/3 of the students that are eligible to a free subscription that who activated it. And out of them, 70% use it at least once. And you will see, I'm going to show you some numbers, but the uptake is pretty large compared to the very few other attempts in the literature.
That's Julia. That's in the two arms.
Yes.
That with access, both with instruction and the other just
Exactly.
the access only, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
is it different? Maybe you're getting there. Is it different when you have the instruction on top of it?
Not really for now. So, I I did one plot at the end of the day. For now, when we do it in terms of like number of visits, we don't see a huge difference between the students in the two groups. Like in terms of like activating the subscription, for sure there is no difference. And in terms of use, like this is it's not statistically significant. Like to be totally honest. And one of the things that we really want to discuss with you today is what we should include in the pre-analysis plan, what we had in mind, and what we should do on top of it.
Julia,
Yeah.
One thing that comes to my mind listening to you is that you might have like some substitution effect, that people are like students are going to use that particular media and not instead of another one, but they would have, picked one. So I'm thinking, saying that means actually what you would like to know is also what are, the control group kids doing, and what are like, which would be even cooler, like what are the kids in the same schools, the other kids in the same schools doing. I think there is a way, so like on all social medias that the kids at that age actually use, I think that there is a way to know where people live, which should be a proxy for like which school you attend. But I don't know, and you could see, what kind of stuff students, like in the social media. Do they change the way they consume other social medias and stuff like that? But I don't know. I actually don't know. I've been asking myself that for a long time, how to get your hand on these data. I think there's like some American researchers are using that.
So you have a number of different questions here. I guess the first one is whether or not you are going to have some substitution effect with other media outlets. First of all, whether they were already subscribing to the media in our sample. Of course, on that we survey them ex ante, and we are also going to survey them at the very end. And this will be part of what we do. And we also survey them about their use of social media, which is kind of important for us. So that we will have at least the self-reported answer in terms of change in their behavior. Now, the second point is the kind of data we can have in terms of social media access. I'm fighting. We are, like for another project I have. To be totally honest, now I am feeling complaint with the European Commission. The European Commission asked a researcher to file complaint against Facebook, X, Instagram, so that we can get access to data. This is the current state of the research. So you do have like some researchers, like a very small group that got access to Facebook and Instagram data together with Meta. I'm going to go to that in the literature review, in particular to see what happens if you deactivate a little bit the social media use. These are different research questions, and you need Facebook to be part of it. They won't participate in something like that. You can have some exception when you do have data and you do not collaborate with the social media platforms, and this is what Philin and is doing with Germain Gauthier and Katia, for example, with Twitter. But then you recruit people online, and basically you ask them whether you can follow their news consumption online and their social media use online. But this is kind of different. But with respect to the information, like geolocalized information on social media, just to give you one more precision, is that at the end of the day, when we were like working together with the media to see what would happen, for example, if rather than sending a message to the students with one of the news article, we sent some content they produce, for example, for TikTok. And the thing is that the media wants even if the student switch to the media account on TikTok, the media outlets will lose all the statistics on the student and subscriber. So they will receive from the social media platform aggregate data on the articles, but no individual level data. So the media itself cannot follow its own subscriber on its own social media accounts. So that I am sure we won't have information, because in a sense it exists. It is in the end of Instagram and TikTok, whatever. But this is really information they do not share. They do not even share it with the media outlets.
So I think they share some information that is aggregated at the geographical level, and then the question is like, how precise is that geographic level, right? And
Yeah,
even
yeah, but
that, I think it's
it
hard.
won't be precise enough for us. Yeah.
Thanks.
But that's a good point, and I guess it also matters for us in the way we need to think about the way we evaluate the change in their time use pattern, in particular in terms of time you spent on social media versus on other media outlets. I will spend a little bit on time on the media economics literature, like just also to give you a sense of where we want to contribute to this literature. well, there is a large literature on media economics and in particular on the impact of information. There are a few experiments. If you look at the existing literature, on average, it mostly takes news consumption as given. And then it investigates the consequences of news consumption. So you have like a paper by Gensko and others that look at the impact of like getting access to newspapers on political participation. Getting access, this is Stromberg, to radio on political participation and allocation of public spending. Gavaza, getting access to the internet on political participation and also local municipality spending. But very often news consumption is taken as given. Well, what we are going to do here is that we are going to try to modify the news consumption patterns. You have some previous field experiments that tended to do so. In general, their focus is really on the impact of partisan media. One article that I really do like is by Brookman and Kala, for example, who did expose Fox News viewers to CNN for a month. So they paid them and see whether they change their knowledge, belief, etc. You have a great paper by Roy Levy in the IR that did a little bit the same thing, where he basically recruited people on Facebook and then he assigned them to either MSNBC or Fox News and see how it changed also their news consumption pattern. So you have a little bit of literature on that, but the idea is really about like trying to reduce polarization basically by exposing the different individuals to different kind of news. That I previously referred to it, and I guess Nina, perhaps you had that in mind. All the papers by Alcott and co-authors that did partner in particular with Facebook and Instagram to measure the negative consequences of social media, for example, on digital addiction. And you have a little bit of literature on the impact of information provision on political outcomes. So you give some information to citizens, like, for example, before elections, and you see whether this change their behavior. Compared to that, in fact, we do three different things. First of all, and this would be very important for us, is that we offer subscription to a non-partisan news source. And this is really not about partisanship. For us, it's really about like whether or not people consume information. So it was voluntarily non-partisan. Okay? We did not want it to suffer from some bias that people from the left, they don't write a newspaper from the right or the opposite. The second thing, and that is also important for us, is that we do not incentivize the participants. We attempt at kind of a real life experiment, and this will be important in terms of external validity. So we give the subscription for free, or the media education course, but you are not paid to consume the newspapers. While all the previous study, basically, given that you recruit people online, you tend to pay them to ensure that they are going to participate. And the last thing is, well, we are interested in news consumption per se, and the idea is to have a long-term experiment. Because obviously, given that we do not pay them, we don't have to focus just on 1 month, when we pay them every day so that they consume information. Here, we can treat them for an entire school year. Okay. There were one previous attempt at encouraging news consumption that was done by Hopkins and Gorton. They did an RCT in Pennsylvania, and they picked Pennsylvania on purpose because this was one of the swing states in the US elections. So they had a sample with 5,000 individuals, treated group, control group. So their treated group was with 2,500 individuals who were offered free online subscription to local newspapers. And at the end of the day, 44 people subscribed. So the only evidence we have in terms of uptake in the literature when you give news for free is very, very low. A priori, we have something like much better, like both in terms of like taking the subscription for sure, and we have 2/3, but even of using the subscription. So we might expect larger effects because at the end of the day, of course, they do not find any effect of the news given for free, but there are 44 people that are actually treated. And the other thing, which I guess would be of interest for us, is that we can go beyond the only price barrier by looking at the intersection between media education and free access to news. They
Yeah.
what?
So you say it's unbiased, like politically unbiased media. I guess that would be hard to argue depending on, people's beliefs and stuff. And so my point is just to say, so I think there's a very interesting question, which I think is your question, which is what's the effect of unbiased news on, you know, what I think the final point is to figure out what people are going to think and how this is going to change their behavior. And that may change the way they vote, even if information is not biased. But you know, it's also hard to argue that the information that they get is actually not biased. So I guess here, you know, there might be some trick. I mean,
I know. So we will see. We don't like the agreement we have with the media company is that before we are entirely done with the experiment and paper, but they are going to decide at the end of the day whether they agree or not to see their name appearing. So perhaps in case we can give their name, it will be like easier for us to argue that this is non-partisan. But like this is not valeur actuelle nor l'humanité in a sense. But then of course you can always like argue that. But compared, let's say, to all the literature that say, okay, this is about like giving access to MSNBC versus Fox News, then we can discuss if we were in the UK and giving access to the Guardian, people might say, ah, you know, the Guardian leans liberal. But it will be less partisan than if we were to take the New York Post in the US. But that's true. Yeah. And there is a little bit of literature on improving media literacy. In fact, there was just one paper, and this is kind of strange because we have a growing literature that documents information inequality, and Andrea worked on that before, in particular with Charles Angelucci. Of course, we do have evidence on fake news, but if you look at all the literature on misinformation and fake news, on average, it really focuses on the supply side on the information market. So basically, it look at the fact checkers or the efficiency of fact checked, and you have very few studies that look at the demand side. How can you treat, you know, demand? How can you treat individuals to ensure that they will be less vulnerable to fake news. You have one paper that was one working paper that was recently published by a list and co-authors that did an online framed field experiment with more than 2,200 adults to study misinformation vulnerability. And you have like some attempt at using what they call inoculation treatment against fake news to see whether then people are less vulnerable to fake news. It's a little bit funny, but basically when you expose a lot of people to fake news, the idea is that they might realize better what is fake news and then become less sensitive to it. Here again, what we want to do is we want to expose people to high quality news, and we want to see how it impacts their knowledge and their overall ability to fight misinformation. But we are not like only like focusing on this fake news aspect of information. And I guess this is really important, even if you look at Charles Angelucci and Andrea Pratt paper. Because what they show is that the big difference is really not about fake news. At the end of the day, fake news is really a small part of news. So we focus all the time on fake news, but this is not so much that people believe fake news. This is just that people are not informed. If you ask them very, very basic questions about the election, the candidate, the name of the minister, the inflation rate, whatever, they are not informed. They don't read news. So what we want here to tackle is this issue. Like, how do you ensure that people are going to read some news? And of course, we contribute to the civic education literature that this audience knows very well, and Marc and Simon have a paper on that with the large school-based RCT in 4 European countries, looking at the impact of citizenship projects on civic skills. Here, what we are doing is that we are the first to try to rigorously evaluate a program targeted at media literacy and trying to do it in a causal way. And in fact, trying to change behavior by having this like long-term programs that last for an entire year. Okay. So let me give you a little bit more information regarding the experiment. So again, the objective is to understand why the young do not consume news and what can be done. And in particular, whether this is just about price or whether this is about like lack of information or whether this is about like a mix between the two. And to do that, we partner with this large online news media that is a national news media, so provide national news and not local news, and that is a non-partisan media. And we did a randomized experiment among high school students. So the way we did it is the following. First of all, we did a pilot in 2023-24 with 8 schools. That was very useful for us, to be totally honest. In particular, well, we can enter into these details if you are interested, but some of the questions we were like going to ask at the very beginning, and we did ask during the pilot in the baseline survey, were problematic for the students. For example, when we asked the students about where their parents were born and where their grandparents were born, they were not willing to answer that. So we did improve a little bit our baseline survey just to be sure not to have a lot of dropout in the middle of it, thanks to the pilot. Then we did recruit the school between April and August 2024. We did the baseline survey to have all the information needed for the randomization in September and October. Randomization in October, and we will do the inline beginning in May. I want to highlight the fact that we did everything with Eval Lab and Quentin Davio, who might be online, and this was kind of key for us to have this experiment well implemented. So in terms of sample, our sample includes all the secondary schools in France that agreed to participate in the study. So there were no eligibility criterion for schools. Huh? I'm going to tell you more about how the way we recruited them. But we have like general schools, technological secondary schools, vocational secondary schools, and we have students from seconde, première, and terminale. When schools decided to volunteer, they give us the name of one or more than one teachers who would take part in the program, and we also needed to have all the names of the students and their email address because we need that in case they're included in the news treatment. At the end of the day, we have 245 schools, 383 classes. This is the way we recruited them. So, okay, this won't be like 10 page in the paper, even if we could write a novel about it. For those who helped us a lot, like people from the DEP were key in the recruitment here because they endorse the research program we had. People from CLEMI also. We kind of suffered a lot from the fact that between our first attempt at doing this randomization and the final recruitment of the school, there were 4 different ministers of education in France. So then when you try to negotiate something, you know, it make it a little bit complicated. So at the end of the day, we did it with the DEP and with the CLEMI. We also get help from IDE. That was key for us. We worked a lot with the RAMI. And one of the things that was also of use to recruit schools is that basically we scrapped online the email address of the professor documentalist in every French high schools, and we sent them email. And for those interested, we also offered a number of webinars. Okay. The advantage of our recruitment, according to you, is really the fact that we recruited the schools and not the teachers, and not the students. And this is key because basically when you recruit people online, in particular to participate in experimentation with respect to news, you tend to select people who are already interested into news. So here we do not suffer from this bias, nor do we suffer from the fact that we incentivize the students because we do not pay them. So from this point of view, the set of students that we have is unselected. Obviously, there might be some selection in those schools who accepted to participate. This is why before I told you when we will do the randomization, whether or not these teachers were already doing media education, we are going to take it into account. But basically, we sent an email to all the secondary schools that were from all over France, both metropolitan France and overseas. We put here the school that were interested. In red, we are those that were interested and at the end of the day who did not took part in the program, and in blue those that are finally part of our sample. But you know, we also tried overseas. If I zoom a little bit more on France, we see that we have schools everywhere, and basically that we have schools in every academy. Well, we have a little bit more in Ile-de-France, but there are more secondary schools in Ile-de-France. The only exception that we have is Corsica, but we did ask, but we had no school in Corsica that accepted to participate. Okay. What you also see here, at the very beginning, at the end of the day, we have these 280 schools. At the beginning, we had around like 400 schools that were interested. So this experiment generated a lot of interest, a little bit from everywhere. Okay. In terms of data source, what we did is that we surveyed the student at the start of the experimentation, and we will do it again at the end of the school year. So regarding the students, the surveys are administered on the school computers under the supervision of either the teachers or other members of the school staff, but this was important for us. First of all, because not all the students, they do have a computer at home, and we wanted to be sure that they all fill the survey at the same time and in the same room. So this was done at school, and it will be the same for the online. Regarding the teacher surveys, we send them a link, and we ask them to go to a website and to fill a form. Okay. They have all the same survey, except for those who are in the media education group. In the final survey, we will add a set of specific questions to see whether or not they implemented the curriculum we ask them to implement. We have this news consumption data. So that is incredible data in a sense. We really have all the information on the time spent online. We all have the information, everything that they do online once they're on the news media website. Okay, we know when they click, we know from what page to another page they shift, we know how long they stay online. So for now, okay, I'm just going to give you like a sense of what we can do, but at the end of the day, we can do a lot. And in particular, we can really see like whether people shift from sport to music to international, the kind of topics that they are more interested in, and all this kind of dimension. Okay, and this is not declarative data. This is real world data that we obtain directly by the online news media. Then, thanks to the DEP, we have administrative data that allow us to track the socioeconomic characteristics and the student academic performance. In particular, we have the grades, we have their subject choices, we have their higher education applications, and we will know the higher education institution that they choose to attend. And something we might have, but I'm putting it here because the idea is to have a discussion, is that if there were elections to take place in 2025, which might be possible now in France, we never know, we will be able to track the students' political participation by accessing the electoral rolls. Okay. So this is something that we might want to do, and I'm going to come back to the issue of like the data we have in survey when this is self-reported versus the data we have using actual data, either news data or like voting records, and this is also a dimension that might be of interest for us. In terms of schools and class, so we have 245 schools, 383 class, 1/3 is in the second, 10th grade, 44% in première, 14% in terminal. At the very beginning, this also mattered when we did the pilot. We really wanted to focus on terminal students because we wanted to have voting age students for part of the class. Now it's harder to convince teachers in terminal to take part in an experimentation because they have the baccalaureate and all the stress that is into that. So basically, we are better at recruiting like among 10th grade and 11th grade than among 12th. We had at the beginning a number of 10,700 students in the randomization sample. Out of them, we have 9,600 students that have taken the baseline survey that was taken in class. And we have a lot of information. I'm just going to give you some examples, but on demographics, social media. So of course, we know their gender. We have 55% of female and 42% of male. There is a little bit of inequality from this point of view, depending on the kind of secondary school, but this is not very surprising. More female in general secondary schools, and in technological, less in vocational secondary schools. We have information on their social media presence, so there are different ways of doing it. Either we build this index as a mean of their presence on all the main social media source, or you can look social media by social media. Perhaps this one is clear. So what you see here is that we have like 84% of the students that say that they spend time on Instagram, 82% on YouTube, 80% on Snapchat. WhatsApp is around 72%, followed by Twitter. And this is where you feel kind of old when you realize that these people, they don't go neither on Facebook or on X, but they spend a lot of times on social media that I didn't even know before, like Be Real, for example. Okay. So they spend a lot of time on social media. Here I'm just showing you the share that say, okay, last week we were like we spent time on Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat, but even in terms of time spent, they spent a lot of times on this social media. So in terms of treatment, we did 3 things. First is free access to an online news media. So this is a 1-year-long free online subscription to this high-quality national news media. So the goal here is really to reduce the financial barriers to quality information. The second is media educations. So basically, teachers in the schools, they are given the opportunity to undergo training to deliver media education. I'm highlighting that they are giving the opportunity to undergo training because we cannot ensure that they will do it. And so this is why in the N-line survey, we will survey them about the media education modules they did follow. So the uptake of the training, we should be able to estimate it from the link that were sent by the CLEMI, but for now, we don't have the information. So they could do 3 different things. Either they could do asynchronous training. So basically, there were 3 links that were sent for like up to 8 hours of training. That was given to us by CLEMI. So you have like training on prioritization of information, construction of information disorders. So they could do that whenever they want. There is one thing that they can do with the class, that is class investigation. Basically, this lasts 2.5 hours. This is organized 3 times a month by the CLEMI. And then you do that with your students and you do a media education game online. This is one of the things that CLEMI is used to do and that has never been evaluated. In a sense, we also evaluate here the efficiency of class investigation. And we also send them a number of activities that could be easily implemented in class. It was following a demand from them because some of them were telling us, okay, we do media education, but what should we do? So we give them a number of media education tools. Okay. And the goal here is really to inform students regarding the importance of high quality information. Like the fact that, okay, not all content is news. What you find on social media might not be of same quality than what you find elsewhere, etc., etc. The third intervention is a combination between the two. So you have at the same time free access to media and media education. Regarding the randomization, and to avoid the spillover effects, we did it at the level of the school. And we did stratify by the school socioeconomic status, the school type, the grade level, and the intensity of the media education practice of the participating teachers within the school before the intervention. These are our balance table. So for the teachers, in terms of like gender, age, share of 10th grade teachers, 11th, 12th grade teachers, whether they're in general and technologic secondary school or in vocational secondary school. We define the significant stars in comparison with the control group, and here you see that there is no statistically significant difference. Same thing here with the other aspect of the teacher that we have. We know whether this is prof principal, whether he's permanent or not, whether he's working full-time, whether it has been trained in media education or not. You see that we would like to have more information from the general public of secondary school. So there is no difference, of course, because we stratified on that. There is no difference across our treatment. But the share of teachers in our samples that have been trained in media education is pretty high, but which might be linked to some school selection into our experiment. whether they tend to consume news, etc., etc. Regarding the students, we have information on their gender, age, whether they live with their two parents or not, whether they are born in France, and then we ask them questions about how well they are informed, whether they inform themselves on TV, radio, newspapers, social networks, whether they do trust social networks or not, whether they have had media education, whether they know about fact checking, and we also ask them a number of questions about their interest and knowledge in news. Okay. Okay. So I'm just going to show you some results that we have regarding the uptake of the free subscription. So we have 3,600 individuals in the free media access treatment groups. So more or less half in the T1, just free media access, and half in T3, free media access plus media education. Out of them, we have 2,300 students that have activated their subscription. So basically around 66%. So compared to, okay, the few evidence we have from the literature, it's a pretty high uptake. And out of them, 70% have made at least one action on the news website. So here you will see that there is, okay, this is another way to see that. So total in treatment is those that were supposed that received the links to activate their subscription to the news media. The second bar is the subset of those who did subscribe, so around two-thirds. The third bar is those that who did go on the website at least once, so 70% of the subscriber. And the last bar is those that did it at least more than 10 times, knowing that they got their subscription around October, November. So at least they went there like twice a month.
Julia, on
Yeah.
take-up, I had two questions. Maybe one is the next slide, actually. Do you have ways to measure always takers? So people in the control group that do have a subscription to that same news media. Maybe it's completely negligible, but would you know anything about that?
So they were already subscribing to the news media, and so they continue.
Yes, or they have since the start of, well, whatever, right? I don't feel the spillover because you are in different schools. So otherwise, you would of course fear that because my friend has started to read that, to use that newspaper, I will do the same. That you don't expect that, but by chance or lack of chance, it may be the case that people in the control group also uh,
That's true.
use that
Yes.
same paper. Do you have any way to know that?
It's the substitution effect that we were talking about
Yeah.
earlier, right?
But we
So
don't have the data from the news media for the control group. We only have it
Yeah.
specifically for the subscriptions that are offered to the students in the treatment
we have
groups.
it in the survey data. So when we survey them in
Yeah.
the baseline, we ask them, did you consume like a number of media, including the one to which they are,
Okay.
and we ask them whether or not they subscribe to it. But I think this is completely negligible. I don't remember. The
Okay.
share of those that say is that they read it is not negligible. The share of those that say that they do have a subscription is very, very low.
Okay, cool. And the other question, but maybe that's the next slide, is the dynamics of take-up, which is, of course, probably important. I would expect that it decreases with time very strongly, maybe. I don't know if you've already
So
had data to judge this.
that we have to do we have to do more on the in terms of analysis, because basically what we want to study, we are able to study it, is just that we have not done it yet, is to see first of all where when the teachers in those that are both in the media education group plus free media group, when the teacher do perform some media education training, do we see then an increase in the take up following that? You will see that we also sent a number of push message, like with some like link to like a news article, and that we really need to see over time. For now, to be totally honest, what is kind of striking is that okay, the take up in terms of subscription is good. The take up in terms of overall visit is pretty high. Then a lot of them they just went once or twice. So there is heterogeneity, and then we needed to we bind it at the top, because some people they spend like 1,000 time on the website, but a lot of them are on the left-hand side. This is true in terms of number of visits. You also have the same thing in terms of viewed page. So we have a number of like people who consume a lot, but a lot of them, you know, they spend a little bit of time, but not so much. This is number of page views. You can look at the time spent. This is the same thing.
Sorry, Julia.
Yeah.
At some point you said the take-up was measured per month, or is that for the whole year? You know, for how long is that? They spend
So,
like
no, they can go whenever they want. So what the first thing that we have in terms
yeah,
of
that you measure the take-up over which period?
yeah, so here we did that from the day of the subscription until a week ago when we had the last extra.
It's like what? In 8 months, like they spend 100 minutes.
Yeah, 6 months more, but yeah. No,
Okay.
no, at the end of the day, the time they spent online is not huge. And this is one of the things to which I am coming, because we still have a little bit of time and we want to see what we should do with respect to that. There is a little bit of heterogeneity. This one is statistically significant. Okay, you are going to tell me this is not so surprising, but they read it more when they're in general secondary school than in technological or vocational secondary school. The one that I was more expected, to be totally honest, I was expecting 12th grade students to spend more time online than 11th and 10th, in particular because they're older, so they're 18, so I was supposed that they read news more. And this is not something that we do find, so you might also think that they are more busy, but still they do not spend more time online. On that, and to be totally honest, we need to do more. In particular, Mark, you asked me the question before, and we just have one plot that is not statistically significant, so I didn't show it to you. But we need to look at the various dimensions of heterogeneity. First of all, with respect to whether you're in T1 versus T1 plus T3. And here we collapsed. You know, I took the 6 months and we collapsed over the 6 months, but it will be of interest to look at, like for T3, you know, some teachers, they only took the media education training class in January. So of course, perhaps there were like no news consumption from October to January, but more now. So it's a little bit of so we need to take this timing into account in a much better way than what we do today. Basically, we have to do it. And the other thing that we did and that need to be evaluated is that we send 3 push messages. The first one was not sent by us, but by the newspaper. But the limit of that is that, so the advantage of that is this is really the same kind of message that the students who have their news notification activated receive. And we pick like a user-friendly, let's say, article, like things about like video games, this kind of stuff. But the main limit of that is that a lot of them, they have not their notification activated. So then they do not receive the message. So the second message, push message that we sent was the same kind of news articles, exactly the same kind, but not to the same student. We shift the news articles between students. And we did that via WhatsApp. So then they don't need to have their notification activated. They all receive the WhatsApp message. And the third thing that we did is that we send the video. Because when we see this number in terms of news consumption, they are not huge. So we went back to the schools, to a number of schools, and we asked students why they do not consume more. And a number of them, they just say that they're afraid by the content and they find it a little bit boring. So we thought that by trying a video, it might work better. So we will see. Okay.
Do you think there's any chance that you can have a model that identifies a subgroup that characterizes the guys who are very much on the right-hand side, the strong consumers? I guess it's hard, but maybe when you have, I don't know, school performance, maybe it's connected with, I don't know, it's a guess, right?
Yeah, school performance
Well,
and PCS, right?
and PCS, right? So maybe
Yeah.
there's a way to have focus on subgroups where the take-up will be larger. Of course, there's an arbitrage with sample size, etc.
So it's not clear it's the group on which to expect the strongest effect in that case.
Not necessarily, but yeah, I agree. It's always complicated, right? You don't know if it's just treatment heterogeneity or higher take-up that drives any difference, but it will be still interesting, I guess, to
No,
to answer kind of your initial question, Julia, which is what should you put in terms of heterogeneity in your pre-analysis plan? I do think that socioeconomic status and maybe test score. I don't know. I would tend to think more socioeconomic status, but maybe I'm wrong. Whether you manage to actually, get students from very low social background, or maybe more precisely, those who usually wouldn't consume news to actually consume it, right?
And we have a lot of those. But we already have like every kind of schools, including like vocational schools, like people that are 16, and you do not expect them to read this kind of like newspaper. That's true that if you can shift them, then we'll have an eye effect on the groups that we did not. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So in terms of pre-analysis pardon. So our plan is to articulate it around the following research questions. So how to increase high quality news consumption among the youth? Does increased high quality news consumption boost youth political knowledge and participation? And can media education boost youth political knowledge and participation, even without any free access to a news media? So we plan to have like 4 sets of questions. The first one will be like towards media and news consumption behavior. So for news consumption, what would be nice is that we both have the internal data from our partner media plus the survey data. We ask questions about interest in political news and trust in journalists and the media. And we also want to survey them about their use of fact-checking tools. We want to ask questions about media literacy and civic knowledge, so knowledge of political news in France, Europe, world, and also a little bit of sport knowledge. A question about civic institution, about the economy, inflation, minimum wage, environmental knowledge. We plan to ask questions about political participation. Part of it, again, if there were to be election in 2025, we might want to combine what we will have in the survey data with the use of the voting records. And we also want to survey them about the media education activities in schools, asking both the students and the teachers, which are part of the T2 and T3 treatment groups. Okay. Yeah. What else? This is open to you. We were like wondering whether we should ask them about their ability to assess the reliability of information sources. Like whether or not, when you give them like 2 different information sources, they're able to see whether one is reliable or not. Now we just have a set of questions about, okay, do you use these kind of fact-checking tools? Whether or not we have a way to measure it in a more reliable way, in a sense. Might ask them because they are young and they have different form of political engagement, whether they sign petitions, for example. And perhaps about their willingness to share a fake versus a true news in the future. And the very last thing,
Maybe
yeah.
I'm thinking maybe something that would, because it's hard. I mean, it's hard to ask on this kind of stuff, right? You would prefer to see what people actually do, right? And so I'm just thinking doing something like you put them all in the control in the treatment group in front of the computer, and then you make, something that looks like Instagram or something, and you have like, stories showing up, and you see how they react, what they like, what they, this kind of stuff. Maybe more, closer to, I mean, the other option is just to ask them whether you can access their social media accounts. But I mean, that might be a bit more tricky. I mean, you could ask them, do you want to, you can also, have 10, 15 minutes at school to register on your online account if you accept us to look at what you're doing while you do that. I don't know, maybe they would actually agree. And see what they do on their own account. But another possibility is try to fake it, right? Do something that feeds them stuff like fake or true and see how they react. I don't know.
Knowing that one of the main constraints I guess we have, Simon, correct me if you don't agree, is that basically this online survey, if we have 1 hour, we are fine. And we won't have more than that because they do that in school. So we need the teachers to take 1 hour to bring them to the... So we will have a little bit of time, but not so long in order to test. Because one of the things that would be nice, of course, would be, for example, you confront them with a couple of news story, you ask them about whether it is true or not, and you see how they react to that. So whether they shift to a different media outlets but yeah.
No.
Now you have like some papers like Simonov and those, or that you have some like easy tracking tools that you can put on Firefox, whatever, like to follow behavior for a given hour. But knowing that they would agree to that, of course, but
So I agree. I think with Nina that having actual behavior measures and not just survey would be super nice. I don't think with Briol, with Simon and Eric, we tried that in the paper that you mentioned. I'm not sure we really were so good at it. So so I'm not giving lessons here, but obviously it's something. And I think when you say willingness to share fake and true news, I have the impression I've seen papers where people have done these sort of things. Going maybe very far into this kind of manipulations, and probably you could reproduce some of the stuff that are around in the literature in terms of, and which then do not necessarily have to happen during the survey time, which I understand is restricted, of course. But maybe if you have contact emails or whatever for the students, you can send them stuff and see what they do of it, or what I mean, you probably can be inventive on that, and this would certainly add value to the
Yep.
to the paper, no?
but this is part of the thing. Yes, I was going to finish with this. First of all, one of the things that we will be able to do is we will get information. This is part of our partnership with the news media on whether they continue the subscription. So if they decide to pay for it, I'm not super optimistic about that, but that we will have. The second thing is that we do have their
Il y a
contact.
toujours ces contrôles qui sont à faire et j'entends aussi le fait de.
That's right. The second thing that we will have is basically the majority of them, they gave us either their email address or their phone number or both. So the idea is also that we will be able like to continue serving them. I'm not saying that they will all answer, but perhaps in 6 months or like after that. And the last thing that we were thinking, but in fact we have like two more things that I want to put here and have your feedback on, is that at the end of the day we had like this 3,600 subscription for which we paid, and we had 2/3 uptake. So it means that we still have 1/3 subscription for which we did not use. So what should we do with that? And in your view, and in particular, perhaps we should use them to do an experiment, but this time online, where we do incentivize participants and we see like whether we need to pay them to consume news or not. I don't know. We still have this also opportunity to push a little bit more what we did, but did it in a different framework. Of course, we are not going to redo what we did in terms of this is too much in terms of implementation, price, cost, and okay, we have a full year. Or maybe we continue with the same set of students, but we offer them like one additional year of news subscription. We have this possibility on which we're also looking for your feedbacks. And I think, yeah.
Additional year would seem like natural thing to do, I guess. That would be my intuition. Including because I think the risk that you're running right now would be the low take-up or intensity of take-up, let's say.
Yeah.
You have quite high take-up, but the intensity you're not pretty sure.
Yeah.
So maybe the second year would, at least for a subgroup, give you a chance to threaten that, maybe.
Yeah.
It's a guess.
And yeah, and the very last thing that, okay, this is a different research question, but I think it's of interest. Yeah.
There's something that is said in the chat, which I think is very relevant, is about, I guess you include conspiracy theories in fake news, which makes sense. But I think that's per se something that you may want to look at when if you manage to feed them some information, true or false. I guess that's a question per se that is, I guess, very salient for young folks, I would say.
Yeah, all right.
I had a question, sorry, Julia, before you talk about that. So you did not consider using the partial population design nature of your experiment. There are in non-voluntary classes, both in treatment and control groups, there are untreated people that may be affected by treated people around them. And you can compare those classes because you randomize the schools, so they are comparable. I'm not sure how much you can get from that. You could run surveys with some of those kids. The thing you'd like to have would be to run surveys on the closest friends to the treated, otherwise it's going to be super diluted and you're not going to get anything. So maybe that's too late for it.
In fact, we
I wonder
asked,
if you thought a bit about that.
yeah, we asked them at the beginning about their friends.
Mm.
We spent a lot of time thinking about like asking the best way to ask about the friends, in particular for those in seconde, because given that we survey them in October, and a lot of them come from different college, they don't really know who are their friends, and in terms of networks. But basically, that was something that came back on the table a number of times, like to define kind of networks of friends, and basically we did not find a good way to implement it. Even if we can still ask them about their friends now and try to survey them. What do you think, Simon?
But the thing is that so we implemented the same kind of questions than the one we implemented for our project, Mark,
Yeah.
to measure the friendship network. But the point is that we only have this network within the classrooms, within the classes.
Mm.
And so within the class, there's either only treated students or control students. And so yes, we thought at some point about trying to measure, trying to implement surveys on other classes, but from a logistical point of view, we thought it would be super complicated because we rely quite a lot on the teacher that is participating to the experiment.
Do
So
you
yeah,
have a lot of people who refuse to participate?
uh,
Because you could
you
use
mean
these guys, at least for the educational
students? You mean
Yes.
students? The fact is that, so there was also a question in the chat about it. I'm not sure we're able to distinguish between, for example, those who refuse to, activate their account because they don't want us to access some data to observe their behaviors, etc. We're not able to distinguish this from just like not activating the account for any other reason. So we don't know whether they just refuse or just, I don't know, are lazy to do so.
Well, still, then you
But
have
still,
those who do not activate their
yeah.
account.
Simon,
So
why
this
we
we
could
do.
ask them, no? That this is something we never ask, but at the
Yeah.
end of the day, they are going to take the end line because they do that within
In
the
the
car.
survey. Mm.
So we can ask them in the end line survey.
Your
Like,
problem is
if
that you can't, it's not a partial population design in the sense, in that case, in the sense that you can't identify these in the control group, right? So
Yeah, no, not exactly, but it's true that we could look, for example, use both the information on friends and the information of who activated the account and who did not, and to try to look at maybe
another
there are
possibility
some
is to
discrepancy.
offer the account to the control group at the end of the year and see who signs up and who doesn't sign up, right? But then you can't look at long-term effects anymore.
ouais. But we can look at the long-term effects, at least
But
in terms of news consumption a little bit.
I understood. Where would you offer the subscriptions to the students in the control group?
To figure out who would say no to register in the control group. And then that compares to the treated who said no. And they're probably the folks that you actually want to target. Might be. So would be cool to show that you do find stuff on them, but then they would have to answer some of your surveys for you to get something.
Yeah. That's true. No, and the very last one, it was just an idea. It's a technical idea, but I guess it will be of interest. But this is part of the discussion we had before. And by the way, if there were to be election, we could do that also with the voting record. Is basically for the subset of the students in T1 or T3, we have both their actual news consumption patterns because we follow them online, and we'll survey them about how much they pretend that they go online and read the newspapers, whatever. And we have their socioeconomic characteristics. So basically, we can look at correlate at least of over-reporting. And I think that this is of interest per se. So this is not like a paper per se, and this will be just a bit of an addition to this research. But per se, I think it's interesting to see whether or not you have like some socioeconomic characteristics that are associated with the probability of over-reporting. Like I'm just thinking, like gender, for example, like do female student they want to look like more like doing better, so they're going to report they consume news even if they did not, or I don't know. Like, and this is one of the things that we will be able to look at, as well as political participation in case there are elections, and we can also collect the voting records.
Hmm. How is take up by gender? Did you show that? I'm not sure.
We did not. We should have.
You don't
But
know.
we know. No, I didn't look into the data. I
Okay.
have the
Okay.
data to know, but
Yeah,
I don't
yeah. You don't know right now. Okay.
know. That's a very good point.
Might be very different.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, and that's yeah, that's what we have for now.
There might be, I think, Elena, you were talking about, the importance of social norms on these stuff. So maybe trying to pinpoint, because you don't have the friends, but at least, by gender, cross, test scores, that's probably a good proxy of friends. And looking at that, whether you have, whether you can find, in the control group, you can define that too, and you can see whether, you have kind of like effet d'entraînement based on, what's the norm in my friends, like ish.
Can you look if they some timing of event stuff like if they look more to the online news when something happens?
Yeah,
When
so that
something interesting happens, do you see a spike? I mean, do they refer to the news when we are talking about this event or that event and they want to learn more about the reality of it or something like this?
yeah, that's something that we'll be able to do, and even more than that, during our past discussion with the newspaper, we now they are going to give us aggregated statistics on all the articles, so that we will be able to see whether our kids they behave the same way that all the other subscribers,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
whether they are interested in the same information, let's say, peak than the others.
that's
So
super
that at the
cool.
beginning we did not have, and then we thought that it might be of interest, and so these are the kind of statistics that they're also providing us now.
Yeah.
That would be nice, yeah.
Mm.
But then we'll see, like the in the last push, the video we sent them is the one by Violaine. I forgot her name, so I thought it was super popular. Violaine, the French navigatrice,
Mm.
Violaine d'Orange,
Mm.
because she was everywhere in the news, and we thought, okay, a video about her, it might work. So we'll see whether they're interested as the rest of the population. Part of the main thing that we don't know, like we might want to do as a follow-up, but we are blocked by this thing that we cannot follow them on their social media.
Mm.
We want to know whether this is about the content. Okay, they are uninterested into international politics and everything is about international politics, or whether this is about the format. And when you provide them the same content but with a TikTok video, they like it much more and they engage much more. And the really main limitation that we face today is that when they are outside of the news website, we lose them. The other thing that we face, basically, to be totally honest, and this play a little bit of a role when we look at the difference. In the pilot, it was playing a role when looking at the difference between the actual consumption pattern and what we have in the survey. Is that for the news website, you can activate the news notification on your phone, and the number of kids they report that they read the notification on the phone. And given that they are used to scroll, X or whatever, for them it's enough information, so they never click on it.
Yeah.
But if they don't click on it, in our data, this is as if they did not read it. Because they need to click for us to observe them. So this is also part of the bias we suffer from. But this will be act against us. At least we are not going to overestimate any effect, but this might lead us to underestimate the effect.
You know, yeah. So you can't know if they how do you say that suivre if they follow the news outlet on their social media platform. That the news outlet doesn't know that this very person is following them.
No.
Hmm.
So we could do that manually in a sense. For X, for example, we could do that. But I don't even know whether we can do that on TikTok or... Because for X, for any account, you have the list of the followers. So we have their name. Well,
Yeah.
it would be complicated
Yeah.
to do, but if we were
But
really
then
willing to do it. But for
there would be
Instagram,
some
TikTok, I don't know.
there would be some ethical issue. I mean, we would need to have their consent before doing that.
Probably.
Because then we are going to link this data with all the data that we have.
Yeah, but in terms of... Okay, it depends.
We could ask them. I mean, we could ask them
Yes,
whether they agree that we kind of follow their basic behavior on social media, etc.
Yeah. That's true.
Okay, maybe we should stop there. Any other, and if there's any other questions or comment? Elena, you made your comments on in the chat, right? Cool, thank you very much. Alice, do you want to say something, Alice, before we stop? No, maybe Alice is gone. She just wrote something.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Can I switch to French
Oui, vas-y.
Ok, c'est plus facile pour moi. Merci beaucoup, c'est très intéressant. Je saisis l'opportunité. Moi, je travaille qu'en éducation prioritaire dans une association qui fait de l'éducation à l'info. Et j'ai travaillé avec Simon, d'ailleurs, Briol, au tout début sur la construction des grilles d'évaluation. Nous, on se focalise sur la lutte contre la désinformation, mais ça va de pair avec la consommation d'infos authentiques. Et on vient de sortir là une enquête sur 1400 jeunes, donc pas représentatif, contrairement à votre énorme boulot, pas du tout représentatif de quoi que ce soit, mais simplement de REP++, au Murau, à Mantes-la-Jolie, etc. Et une conclusion importante, c'est que leur façon de consommer de l'info est très affectée par par la pensée motivée. Enfin, c'est des travaux plutôt de sociaux, mais qui parlent de ça, mais c'est-à-dire un rapport motivé à l'information qui font que biais de confirmation aidant, ils sélectionnent les sources et les consommations et les informations qui vont plutôt dans leur sens. Tout ça pour suggérer que dans les paramètres que vous évaluez comme liés à la souscription et à la consommation à long terme d'infos, enfin de médias de qualité, est-ce que ce serait pas intéressant d'intégrer des éléments sur précisément leur niveau d'ouverture d'esprit? Est-ce que je suis capable est-ce que j'aime changer d'avis si je suis confrontée à des informations qui vont à l'encontre de mes convictions, et le niveau de confiance au départ dans les institutions en général et les médias en particulier. Voilà, j'ai essayé de faire le plus court possible. Je sais pas si ça fait sens pour vous.
Sur le premier point, on les a déjà interrogés en vrai, et sur le niveau de confiance dans journalistes, médias, institutions. T'as raison que sur le deuxième... En fait, c'est pour ça qu'on a pris ce média non partisan, pour pas être que dans des biais de confirmation, mais c'est vrai que le biais de confirmation, il n'est pas forcément que politique. Peut-être raison de dire qu'il peut être aussi en termes d'intérêt pour tel ou tel sujet, ou qu'est-ce que tu penses que c'est un sujet dont on devrait traiter. Là, on leur a demandé, en fait, je vous ai mis un graphe tout à l'heure où j'ai résumé avec un espèce d'index Interesting News. En fait, on les a interrogés un peu plus précisément que ça. C'était un graph collapse, mais on a fait Interesting Politics dans affaires internationales, intérêt pour le sport, intérêt pour la musique, tout ça. C'est vrai que c'est des dimensions qui sont assez importantes et il faudrait peut-être qu'on trouve un moyen aussi de mieux les re-identifier comme dimension d'hétérogénéité à la fin. En fait, tu sais,
Ouais.
Simon, j'allais dire, mais je ferai tout le monde, mais ça me fait penser. La- Et en fait, ça répondrait peut-être aussi à la discussion qu'on a eue tout à l'heure. Une des choses qu'il faudrait qu'on fasse, c'est qu'on les interroge sur la perception du média. Et sur une échelle de 0 à 10, toi, à la fois qu'on les interroge sur eux, où ils se mettent sur une échelle de 0 à 10 politiquement, et sur une échelle de 0 à 10, où ils mettent le média politiquement, dans le headline. Et voir si ça joue, en fait.
Je fais une toute petite parenthèse anecdotique, mais par exemple sur l'affaire Naël, nous on est avec des jeunes qui ont suivi ces infos-là, et au moment du renvoi aux assises du policier qui l'a tué, ça a fait les titres, et la plupart avaient pas vu passer cette information, et les rares qui l'avaient vu nous ont expliqué qu'en fait ils avaient swipé parce que c'était une info qui correspondait pas à la façon dont ils se représentaient la justice en France, puisque c'était assez peu probable pour eux, selon eux, que la justice sanctionne ce policier. Donc c'est un exemple un peu anecdotique, désolé, mais qui montre peut-être que typiquement la une du Monde qui était là-dessus, en fait leur échappe, mais par motivation.
Ok. Ouais.
Mmh.
Ok, je propose quand même qu'on arrête
Pardon.
parce qu'on a très largement dépassé, mais c'était par plaisir et par intérêt. Vraiment, merci. C'est un super beau projet, très impressionnant. J'espère que tout va bien finir jusqu'au bout parce que c'est toujours c'est toujours le lait sur le feu, ces trucs. Donc, on mesure vraiment l'énorme boulot que c'est pour vous et franchement,
Ouais,
c'est
bah, j'en profite pour
super
remercier à
intéressant.
nouveau Quentin, quoi. Et il y a aussi
Mm.
Lucas qui travaille avec Quentin. Enfin, je veux dire, Evalab, moi, c'est la première fois que je fais une RCT. Simon, il a plus l'habitude, mais je pense que voilà, sans eux, on n'aurait rien eu de tout ça, quoi. Donc, c'est aussi
C'est
vachement
sûr.
important voilà, d'avoir des gens qui savent bien le faire derrière pour nous accompagner. C'est pas tout d'avoir des idées, il faut encore savoir les implémenter, quoi. Et ça change un peu tout. Voilà.
Ouais, merci Quentin. Bon, merci tout le monde, c'était super intéressant.
Merci
À très bientôt.
pour le feedback.
Au
Merci
revoir.
beaucoup. Bonne journée.